Hey, everybody, welcome to View from the Top podcast, where we help family first business owners and entrepreneurs get through the valleys and up the mountains to the very own view from the top. We're glad you're all listening in today. My name is Kevin, aka Wally Wallenbeck, and I've got the host of the show, Aaron Big A Walker. How's it going today, Big A?
Kevin, going good, Wally. Everything going smooth for you? Been a good week?
Yeah, things are going good, man. I'm happy to be on today. Today's a little bit of a different show for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No guest.
normally, yeah, no guest. It was just you and I.
I
And
know.
we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving and generosity and gratitude. And I know that you're passionate about these topics.
One of
You
my
talk about
favorite
them
subjects,
all
right?
the time. So, yeah, how do you want to get us started today?
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about Thanksgiving this year. Very grateful for a lot of things. We're going to get into that in a few minutes, but it looks a little different for me this year. For
Mm.
the first time, we're not going to have our whole family together. And part of me was kinda sad, then part of me was like, "Hey, I can get to the football game earlier." But, the truth is that, one of my daughters and, my oldest granddaughter is not gonna be with us. She's 2nd year in college, and she's gonna be flying directly to New York to meet, her mom's, in-laws, for the first Thanksgiving ever, and so I'm excited for them. I truly am excited. I don't know that Robin necessarily is as excited as I am about it, but she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna embrace this. It's gonna be good, but it's gonna be different." First time in 40 years
Yeah.
we've not done Thanksgiving as a family.
Yeah. You guys have had this. It's been interesting to watch your journey really over the last just couple of years, really, since getting to know you better. My family, my daughters, three daughters, they're all married, right? And they live in Ohio and Minneapolis, and one lives here just south of Nashville. And we've been kind of spread out for a long time. I mean, the last 20 years I spent in Michigan, and my parents are back in New York State, and so we've kind of been spread out for a long time. And we had this, balancing holidays in one place or the other. I know probably a lot of the guys listening today are the same way, right? They're just
Right.
families kind of spread out. But you've had this really great blessing on one side of it, right? Where everybody's been right here, like literally like within 10 minutes or 15 minutes of you.
Right. Right. Yeah. Every year, their husbands come and the grandkids, and we sit around my table and play games and do fun things. And I've never really known differently, because Robin's family is all from here. So all of our extended family, my extended family's here. Like we're just native to right here. And I'm not used to sharing. I'm going to learn though this year. This year's going to
Mm.
be better. It's stretching me a little bit, and I'm glad. And I know a lot of our listeners are going through the same thing. A lot of you have been going through shared experiences for years. Reach out and feel free to comment on this podcast and give me some insight, things that have worked well for you and how to share your family. But it's going to be a good experience. We're going into it with a very positive attitude. We know it's going to be exciting and we know it's going to be fun. I think it's what you make of it. We could sit down and go, "Oh, we don't want to share," and throw a big tizzy over it. But that's not what's best for my kids. That's not what's best for my grandkids. We need to take the approach that Dan Miller has always taught me. What does this make possible?
Mm.
And so we're really looking at it from an excited point of view, just knowing it's going to be different this year. So it's all good. It's all good.
Yep. Changes for sure, right? They happen in life. It's the way it goes, especially as kids get older and all those things with other folks and married folks and the son-in-laws and all that is
Wally,
changes.
what does some of the Thanksgivings look like at your house though? Take us back a little bit to some of the younger years when your kids were
Yeah, sure.
little, and then maybe some experiences that y'all have had today.
Yeah. So when I was younger, my parents got divorced when I was 5, and they both got remarried within a year and a half, I think is about it. And you know, I grew up in this environment where um, very unique, I think, in a lot of divorced families. If it was not having my parents divorced was not great, right? It wasn't great. But if I had to compare it to friends that had parents that were divorced and, some of the things I've experienced with other guys and their families over the years, I had it pretty good. My parents had a joint custody of me, like if that's even a thing anymore. They had joint custody. I lived with my mom and my stepdad, but I would go to my dad and my stepmom's house like every Tuesday night, Thursday night after school, and every Sunday after church. Like, it wasn't like a weekend thing. I mean, I was still embedded in their lives throughout the week, and they in mine. And so that was a pretty, I mean, amicable situation for me growing up, I think. Of course, there was wounds and all that kind of stuff from that, which is for a later date. But on the holidays, it presented some really interesting scenarios. So we won't talk about Christmas now because that's just a crazy situation. But for Thanksgiving, it wasn't uncommon for me to have 3 or 4 Thanksgivings within 48 hours. I mean, full on Thanksgiving meals. A lot of times you'll have two in one day, right? Like you experience that. Maybe you have it with one family in the morning and the other family. I mean, early afternoon, and you have another one in the evening. But then I'd have like these extended family Thanksgivings as well, and so it wasn't uncommon for me just as a kid, like, I'd be driving all over the place.
Were they
And,
different, like radically different? You really enjoyed one and maybe not so much the other, or you did
that's a good question.
activities like was it the same or different?
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think that a lot of times the way that you grow up, you make informed decisions about the way you're gonna do things different when you become a parent or an adult, and that's what it was for me. My parents were great, my family was great,
Sure.
um, and they will tell you today, like, if you were to ask them on this podcast, they would be honest and they would tell you that they weren't super intentional about a lot of things, right? They just things just kind of happened growing up. That's just the way
Right.
that they were raised and the way that they raised us. And so it was a great time of being together as, family. I had the weird uncle that had guns hidden all over his house and you try to find one. And I know it sounds really crazy, but I never found any. But he I think he hit him when he knew we were coming. But he was like just that uncle. So we had those fun family things, the, favorite pies and, the aunts that made this and the cousin this, but most of my mom was a year younger, 6 months younger than young my youngest aunt, if that makes sense. So my mom basically had, all my cousins, let me put it this way, all my cousins were like 10 to 15 years older than I was for the most part. There was a couple that were closer to my age, but so at the family doings and stuff, there wasn't a lot of kids around. It was just a couple of us. And so it wasn't like we had awesome, crazy cousin time, right? It was just we got together and we ate. One of the things we did do that I remember, and I remember the first time that my wife Sonia now, I've been married almost 30 years. I remember the first time she came to a family Thanksgiving, we were dating, we weren't even engaged yet. And one of the things that they did at my mom's family side, right, is I don't know why this was. I don't know. I never asked, but just the way it was. Like the men of the family always went first for their food, right? I None of the other families that we went to or things we did, it was that way. It was just that particular family. It's just what they always did. And it was kind of funny, but I remember things like that. There's
Right.
just a lot of food, a lot of, laughing and joking around and playing.
You
And
think, Kevin, that they weren't as intentional? We've talked about this a lot on other podcasts before. You think it was that era maybe that they were more in survival mode? And I think today we're more in touch with being intentional, personal, professional development, experiences. Like I think about my parents when I was young, it's like they didn't have as many opportunities as I have today. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the connection. Oftentimes, do you think it's more of a learned behavior to have these experiences that you and I talk about now more so than then?
yeah, maybe that's the key to it. Maybe that's the distinction is available resources. I know that, when we were raising our children, we had a lot more. And obviously, as my children now are raising their children, they have even more, that I had. When my parents were raising us, it was very relational, training, right? Meaning that if you were going to be taught something, it was basically one person teaching you how to do that thing. And then when we probably as we got older and we started having kids, my wife and I, it was like, tapes and DVDs, right? I mean, that's
Right.
you still had classroom training, but there was so many more things available digitally in with tapes and DVDs. And now, right, our kids are raising kids in an era like, I mean, literally last night, where there's the church that we go to, they're going through a Bible study right now, and I'm the author of the book is doing a video live presentation to people in the room at church, plus those that are online watching, right? And it's about how to raising kids and apologetics and sexual identity and all those kind of things. And like that never would have happened or been
Right.
available to my parents or your
So I'm
parents,
talking
right?
about the resources
Yeah.
that are available today are just exponentially greater than they were then. And so I think that we're taking full advantage of that. And that's a good thing. We want to
Mm,
encourage the listeners today that there's so many opportunities today to do experiences and to be focusing on things that you could do for your family, which really kind of ties into the things that we were going to talk about today, even a little bit more about gratitude and generosity and ways that we're generous. And what did you teach your kids about generosity, and how have they used that in their adulthood in raising their kids today?
yeah, when I think about Thanksgiving, a lot of times that's the easy time of the year to think about generosity and stuff. And I know that it's not the only time of the year that we should be generous and that we should be grateful and we should have a gratitude practice for sure. Like we should do that all year round. Um, I think generosity, that's a great question. Generosity, when I was raising my children, I know with our daughters, they're the only kids I have are daughters, I know girls. Being generous with, I mean, first and foremost with the stewardship, the talents and the abilities and the resources that God's given us financially. They were, depending on their age, they were age appropriate, aware of our budgeting in our home. That's just something that we did, and part of that was giving. And for them, we did something that we learned, kind of picked up, maybe not directly, but indirectly, but put it into practice through some of the Financial Peace University stuff with Ramsey back when we were raising our daughters. And one thing was that we would, instead of giving them an allowance, that we all had to participate. They too had to participate in working in the home, with the responsibilities they had just around kitchen, beds and laundry and all that. And we got the idea was planted in our minds about giving them a certain amount of money every month that they were responsible for. I think it started at age 12, and that money included, clothing and shampoo. And like my wife, by the time the girls were 12 and on, she didn't buy any shampoo for them, any hair stuff. Like they had their own. We had taken money out of our budget and put it into categories for them to be able to spend it and learn how to
Wow, they
manage it.
started early.
Yeah, they did. And part of that was tithing. They
Mhm.
had to tithe out of that money that they got every month, and they had to, put that into the plate on once a month on Sunday, just like we did. And so I think there's a foundational, you could call that generosity. You could call that, we call it charity, right?
Right,
On paper.
right.
There's an obedience factor, I think, biblically, if we look at it, there's a tithing and there's an obedience factor there.
Kevin, just for those listening that are unfamiliar with the word tithing, I just
Mhm.
want to suggest that it's 10% of your income. So for
Yeah.
those that are listening today, that know, good. Those that don't, what Kevin's referring to is giving 10% to the local church out of what these kids made or what they were responsible.
Mhm. Yeah. And that came, I mean, that if I think about my parents being intentional of generosity, that was my parents 100%. They were faithful and still are today, over and abundant. So that was something that I did learn. They were intentional. If I think back about that, but I think that's the foundation of generosity is our relationship with God and how we view the things that He has allowed us use the word stewardship, right? Be in charge of. At the end of the day, you could say that, well, they're mine. Well, are they really? Because when you die, you can't take them with you. So are they really yours? Are they just yours to manage while you're here? Right. And I think that's the fundamental
It's good.
piece to generosity is
It's not just,
understanding.
and I know you don't mean it this way, it's not just about the finances, though. I mean, it's being a good steward over all the talents that we've been given. And one of my spiritual gifts is words of encouragement.
Mm,
And I love to give words of encouragement. Recently, within the past couple of years, I did a blog post and I went to a local Panera Bread and I sat there at the door facing the door and watched people as they come through. And when they came through the door, I looked at them very solemn. I didn't smile, didn't wave, I didn't acknowledge their presence. I just looked at them and they gave the same thing back. They looked at me,
right.
they never waved, they never acknowledged me, they never said hello. They didn't nod their head. They didn't do anything. They just looked at me, same look I was given. And I was doing it on purpose. And so 15, 20 minutes went by, maybe half dozen people, maybe a dozen people came through. Not a one of them did anything other than the way I looked at them. Matter of fact, they looked away pretty quickly. They
Mm,
wouldn't even look at me. And so the next 15 minutes, they came through the door and I smiled, these big teeth, and I grinned at them and I looked at them, even nodded my head or winked or said hello. And it was the whole attitude was different. Every person smiled back. They asked how I was. Are you having a good day? How's it going? And I thought we can be generous in many ways.
that's
And
so
for
good.
me, it's that word of encouragement. I know I love to go to the Station Camp Greenway and walk, and you pass people and they won't even look at you. They look down at the ground. And so I got tired of that. And so one day people would walk towards me and they would look and I would say, "Hey man, how's it going? You having a good day? It's a beautiful day today." And they'd look, they go, "Yeah." Well, the next thing we go another lap, it's a quarter mile lap and go another, and they would come back. Some of them would stop me like, "How long you been walking down here? What have you been doing?" And I would shoot videos down there. Well, I had the whole track talking. I said, "Don't look at it. It's being generous, right? It's with our time, with our smiles, with our words of encouragement. Yes, we do need to give generously to help other people financially, but there's just so much more that we can do in
Mm.
being generous."
You do, something that I've learned. I'm glad you brought that up because it's so true. I think I do. When you ask me the question, I think I immediately go to I default to I'm thinking generosity is, our resources. That could be finance, could be time. I've never really thought of it though, the way you just described it. Like I agree with what you're saying, but I've never really thought of it that way. And I know that you take that to the you've taken that to the 10th, the nth degree,
Mm,
both including the finance part
mm,
and including the encouragement part. And tell us, share with us
mm.
like this journey that you've been on with your grandkids over the
Oh,
years.
I'm
And
excited.
I don't want to get you call it, is it gratitude day? Is that right?
Yeah, gratitude day. I'm excited we're talking about this. Thank you for asking me that question because I love to tell this
Yeah.
story. So about 10 years ago, Brooke and Holly, my two daughters, they called me and they said, "Hey, Dad, we'd like to go shopping tomorrow with Mom, but we don't have anybody to watch the kids. Our babysitter kind of something came up and the babysitter couldn't watch the kids. Do you think you would mind watching the kids for a little while?" And there were four grandchildren at that time. I have five now. And I said, "Listen, if it'll get me out of going shopping, I'll do anything. If it'll get me from having to go shopping on Black Friday." And so Brooke and Holly brought the kids over to the house and they met Robin and they got out early. I mean, I don't get it, but they meet like at 4 or 5 in the morning. I'm like, what do you do at 4 or 5
Yikes.
in the morning to go shopping? All these stores open early and I don't want to get out there at 10 o'clock, much less 4 or 5 in the morning. So they brought the kids over and they were still half asleep. And I walked in the sunroom and they said, "Big A, what are we going to do today?" And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about it. I said, "I don't know. What do you want to do today?" And they said, "I don't know, but we figured you'd come up with something fun." And so I sat there and thought for a minute and I said, "Hey, why don't we go have some fun?" And they said, "Yeah, that's what we're talking about." I said, "Let's go eat breakfast." And so Big A will have something by the time we get through with breakfast to do. So we went to the Waffle House and I got them all in a little huddle at the table. And I said, "You know what we're gonna do today? We're gonna show gratitude to other people." I'm making this up on the fly, Kevin, like, as I'm
Really, the
talking,
delay tactic.
I'm
Let's do
making this up.
breakfast. It gives you
It
time to
gave me
think.
time to think. I was like,
Yeah,
"Right,
I love
give
it.
me give
It's
me a
so
minute."
good. Classic grandpa move.
Yeah, because my grandkids are smart. They know I'm conniving. They know I'm thinking, it's like we go eat breakfast and I get them. And so I'm going to tell some things and the audience doesn't necessarily know me. And some of this could be misconstrued. So please don't do that. Really hear from my heart here.
Mm,
So we're sitting there at the table and I said, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to pick out 2 or 3 tables and we're going to tell the waitress that we want their check. And they said, why, Big A? Why are we going to do that? And I said, well, because we want to show gratitude that we are able to do that. We want to be generous with what we've got, but we want to do it anonymously. And my
mm.
grandson said, good, good. What is anonymously? And I said, well, anonymously means that we don't tell anybody that we're doing it. And they said, why would you do it if we're not going to tell anybody? I said, because we want to bless them. We just want to be a blessing to someone else. So then they got excited and they started looking around and they started telling reasons that they wanted to pick up certain tables. They said, let's buy this table because of this, and this
What did
table
they
because
say?
of
I'm
this.
curious, like,
Well,
tell us.
mainly because there were children at the
Oh,
table.
yeah, yeah, okay,
And
okay.
that was the big lure. But then my oldest granddaughter goes, oh, that little old man sitting over there by himself. We need to get his. She shows compassion for senior adults. And so we picked out, I don't know, 3 or 4 tables and a couple of people in the restaurant. We told the waitress, we said, hey, it's at this one Waffle House in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And we told her, we said, hey, we want, and we pointed them out. We said, we want those. And then she said, okay, that's very nice. So she came over there and gave us a ticket. We finished eating and, somebody saw us get the ticket and they walked over there and they started to say, thank you. And I headed them off and I said, listen, I'm teaching my grandchildren to be generous without recognition. I know you're appreciative, but it would help us if you really wouldn't say anything.
Mm.
And so he said, well, thank you. That's very kind. And so later got out to the car and I even explained that to him. Once we got the ticket, we bought our dinner, our breakfast, I mean, and we gave her a really sizable tip, the waitress. And I showed them, I said, here's what we're doing. And they said, man, why would you give her that much money? And I said, well, she's working in here the day after Thanksgiving, and we want to bless her as well. She may have a bunch of kids, and we later found out that she has a bunch of grandkids as well.
Oh, wow.
So we left there, and I thought, man, I don't want this to end. And so we went to Walmart, and we took a buggy, and we filled it up with cookies.
Okay, for those of you that don't live in Tennessee and you don't know what a buggy is,
Mm,
we call it a
I didn't
cart.
even catch I said that. It's a
We
shopping
call it a
cart.
grocery cart, not
It's
a
a shopping
buggy, and we
cart. No, it's
park
a
in
buggy.
parking spots, not parking holes. I'm just saying.
Kevin, Brooke's the only one that says parking hole. I don't like that either, but everybody knows what a buggy is. So we
No,
took
no,
a
no.
buggy or 2, shopping
Buggy, I'm
cart
from
for
I'm from
those of
upstate New
people
York,
that
and a
are
buggy
upstate
up
New
there
York.
is what the Amish pull behind their horses.
Yeah, Wisconsin and, all those places where it's a shopping cart, and so
Okay, fair enough.
we
All right, keep going,
filled
keep going.
we filled that gentleman up with cookies. I mean, I went over there and we bought a whole shopping cart full of cookies, these tins. And so they said, Big A, what are we going to do with all these? I said, we're going to go to the nursing home. It was the fastest thing I could think of. We're going to go to the nursing home where all these senior adults were because Abby loves these senior adults and we're going to give them away. So we got there, knocked on the door. They opened the door, told them what we were doing. Kevin, we had a blast. I mean, I was crying before we left there because all these senior adults sitting around, we went in their room, we gave them these tins of cookies. And so anyway, that took about 2 hours, and we gave all these cookies away, and my grandkids were about in tears.
Mm,
They were like, "This is unbelievable." They'd never been to a senior citizen home like that. They'd never been there, and they didn't know people lived like that. They
mm.
didn't know that everybody didn't get out like we did every day, and they were young, and so we left there, and, they said, "Okay, Big A, is that it?" And I said, "No, we're not done yet. We're not done." So we went back to Walmart, and we bought some gift cards, and we went to the bank and we got some cash and we put into the gift cards. And then we went through drive-through windows and we gave these cards out with like 50 bucks in each one to these people at the drive-through. And then we went down to West End and there's a milkshake place down there. And I said, we're just going to sit here and kind of revisit the day. We're going to talk about things we learned. We're
Mm,
going to eat hamburgers and we're going to drink milkshakes and we're just going to have a great time. Well, we did that and we got back home and Aubrey, my granddaughter, came up to me. She said, Big A, this has been the best day of my life. And I'm like, what? And she said, no, this has been the best day
mm,
of my life. And so that turned into gratitude day. And so every year now we've expounded on that. Like now they'll color cards and they'll do pictures and they get prepared for it. They're like, what can we
mm,
do and where can we go? And so anyway, in ISI, the mastermind that we lead, I started sharing the story. And so now it's become somewhat of a movement. Like other guys are taking their kids and their grandkids out. And one of my buddies said that he went to the bank the day before Thanksgiving and he got like $1,000 out in $10 bills. And he went to Chick-fil-A and he stood at the beginning of the line where you pay. And everybody that came through, he would pay for their food as they came through. And people, he was noticing the same car back in the line again. And they'd come up to the car and they'd say, hey, don't get this next car behind me. We're going to pick up the ones behind me.
mm.
And he said that being generous started other people being generous and they were getting back in line. And so we got to the point where we would go to that same Waffle House. We've been every year for about 10 years. And we would pick up the restaurant. We would just say, if they're in here now, we want to pick up the check. Well, the lady has been the same waitress for 10 years, the same lady.
Wow.
And she sees us every year. And people in there now will stay and they'll go up and pay for the people that come in behind them.
Mm,
And so my point in this is that it's got to start with you. It catapults these people to do things that they normally wouldn't think about. And I've heard stories, Kevin, now for 10 years, guys that will come up, or 5 years now, about since these other guys have been doing it. And they'll say, hey, we'll go in and do this kind of thing. And people will find out we did it. And then they'll pick up somebody else's check
mm.
and they'll pay for somebody else's. And I'm like, so now it's become a thing. Like for us, Gratitude Day has. And you think the audience that's listening to us talk about this today, it doesn't have to be that, but you
Mm.
can create your own thing. I don't know what Gratitude Day is, but we named it. So name something yourself, for your kids, for your grandkids, start a tradition. Just look for ways to be generous because we have a grateful heart.
Man, that's really cool, Big A, idea of gratitude day. I never done anything like that before with, my parents or, I've not done anything like that exactly with my children either. And, so got grandkids coming up, and that'll be a great opportunity to, take some of that and apply that.
It's just been fun to watch them take that on themselves. And one of my granddaughters had something else planned this year that she was going to be away, and she's changed her plans. She's
Wow,
no, I'm going to be there.
that's so
And I'm
cool.
like, that's pretty cool. And so I just want to encourage the listeners out there today that, just take some time, put some effort in it, go to Waffle House, and that'll give you time to create something magical for your kids or grandkids as well. Pick out a place, that literally we've been going every time we go the same Waffle House on Gallatin Road in Hendersonville. And we've done it now the whole time we've been doing it. And, we've changed it up. There's certain things that we've done, when COVID hit, we had to alter the schedule a little bit. We would go and pay off layaways people had. They would have things in layaway, like at Kmart or Penny's or Dillard's, and we would say, "Hey, who's got layaways here? We want to pay those off." You don't have to have a ton of money to do that. People are like, "Yeah, well, if I had your money, I would do those things too." It's not the amount; it's the
Let's talk
act.
about that.
It's
Let's
yeah,
let's break that down because it's
yeah,
so easy, right? That's the first thing that people are gonna be thinking
sure,
about is and it's not that there's lots of people listening that have that kind of disposable
sure,
income,
sure.
right? Or make it a practice of sacrifice, right?
Yeah,
Of giving and being generous in that way. But those that don't even feel convicted to spend money, like what are some things that I
yeah,
love you mentioned the word time, effort, right? You
Right.
mentioned that your kids were your grandkids were, coloring cards
Yeah.
and
They
what
would
are
write
some
little
things
cards out, little Christmas cards, and they would color them, and they would take, coloring books, and they would color pictures, or they would draw their own little picture, and they would write little notes, simple notes, like, "Happy Thanksgiving," or "We love you," or "We're so happy to see you," just little simple things. It didn't cost anything, right?
yeah,
And these little tins of cookies, they cost
not
$5 a
much.
piece or something, or we would go and cash a little bit of money and have like $5 bills, and I would let the kids go up and pay for things in line. We would get behind people in line and pay for things, but it doesn't have to be a lot. See, a lot of people say, yeah, well, if I had that kind of money, I would do
Yeah,
it. See, money doesn't change the heart, it magnifies what's already there.
agreed.
And if we would do it just in a small way, you could maybe not pick out, 2 or 3 tables or the restaurant, but you could pick out a person, and then you could go to the nursing home with colored pictures that didn't give them anything but the picture. That's what meant the most to those senior adults anyway, was those colored pictures and those little cards that they were given, not the money or not the cookies. It didn't have to mean anything. You know what meant more than anything to them, Kevin, was the time
Mm,
that my grandkids spent with them. They would sit down and play checkers with
hmm,
some of those senior adults, or they would just sit there and watch TV with them in the break room. Or we would go in there when they were having meals, and we would just sit there and maybe eat a little something with them, or a little bit of dessert or something. It didn't require any things tangible for these people to get the message. It was just the sake that my grandkids were spending time with them, and they were talking to them. They were asking them about how their week was, and what they needed, or could we pray for them about anything, or just the time. And so don't think that you've got to go out here and do this elaborate paying off layaways, or, you don't have to do all that. It's just the time. And we have elected to do some of those things because we want to be generous. I want to teach my grandchildren to be generous. And I'm like, we're blessed that we've got the things that we've got, and we want to be able to share. Some people are not quite as, up to, you know, this, having some of the things that we've got, and I want to share, and I just want to be able to help, and I want to show my grandkids to be generous as they get older. And so we just got to be mindful that everybody doesn't have what we have. And ever who you are, you can say that all the way down the line. It doesn't even matter what level you are financially. Somebody else doesn't have as much as you've got. And so just teach your children, your grandchildren, to be able to be generous, to be able to be grateful, and teach them thankfulness. And it just goes a long way.
that's cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that for that story. A couple times now you've told it over the years, and every year you guys do something not necessarily different or better, but you do something, and
Yeah, just an
oftentimes it is a little
experience.
different. And so
Yeah.
it's been fun to hear that journey for you guys and
One of my
what you did
grandkids are
together.
not going to be there this year. First time ever for that too.
Oh
We were sharing
man,
that a little earlier,
things
and she's not.
change, don't they?
They change. Yeah,
Things
but
change.
there
Things
again,
change
you know what it's going to allow me to do? Spend more time with the grandchildren that are
that are
there.
there. Yeah,
And
that's good.
so, yeah.
Hey, talking about changes, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. Uh, you know, Thanksgiving. Well, before I go there, just let me say, uh, whoever's out there listening, the whole idea of gratitude day isn't meant. We're not Big A's not sharing that just so you go out and do exactly what Big A did. Now you can do that, right? But the idea is that it gets your mind going, gets your heart
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
right? And you be you. Like go figure out what works for you and your
Right.
children and your grandchildren and and for me, the idea of gratitude and Thanksgiving started around like quite a few years ago, started for me around the Thanksgiving table. And, growing up, like I mentioned before, we would often just grab our food. We would pray and grab our food and sit down and we'd eat and we'd have a great time. But that was it. That was it. We'd have fun and it'd be great. But I, God just gave me this prompting at one point years ago with our kids, with our daughters, that we just wanted to be more intentional with the season that we were in, whether it was And it's great to take the opportunity. I agree we should be generous all year round. We should have gratitude all year round, but it's nice to take that moment, right? Around, like, for us, it was a Thanksgiving table. And so after dinner was over, we would it was expected we would sit, and I've done it different ways throughout the years. I think probably maybe 5, 6 years ago was when I first started this. The girls were a little older; they're in their teen years, but they were still at home. Maybe it's been 8 or 10 years now. Wow, everybody goes up so fast. But at the end of dinner, we're sitting around the table before we start clearing the table, before we have dessert. I think the one of the very first things that I did was, um, and I didn't do this great because I didn't prompt anybody ahead of time what I was doing. So lesson number one, like, if you have guests at your table, your kids kind of know you. It's okay for you to surprise them, but I didn't. I was just like, this is what we're doing. And so I just took the initiative and I was like, hey, we're gonna go around, and everybody was family at the table. Even if they were extended, they were still family at the table. And I said, the person to your left, whoever's to your left. So I'm going to start, and someone was sitting to my left, and I said, I'm going to start with them, and I'm going to share something affirming about them to everyone else. And then everybody else is going to, you're going to keep going around the table. And to the person to your left, you can't pick, just whoever's to your left, something you like about them, something you've seen them do that you found to be encouraging or inspiring or motivating to you, or you've been, it's appreciative of. And we would do that. They just go around the table and everybody would say that. And it's so crazy to see. I remember one of the grandparents. So one of the grandkids had one of the grandparents sitting to their left. And they went on, probably talked for, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes. That's a lot for a teenager to be, to be talking about somebody else like that. And they were talking to them about them to everybody else and affirming them. And that grandparent came to me afterwards and they made a comment. They were crying. It's a very emotional time at the
I'd have been
table, right?
crying like a 8th grade
Yeah.
girl if my
And
grandkids did that.
they came out to me afterwards and they said, no one's ever done that for me. Yeah. This is someone at that time, probably in their late 60s. No one's ever affirmed me before. And if they have, they never did it in front of anyone else.
Made their Thanksgiving.
And I'm like, wow, you know, like, you talk about generosity and gratitude and Thanksgiving, and there was other things that we did too. Sometimes it was just round robin around the table on, uh, how you've been experiencing God at work in your life this year. And it wasn't an opportunity of like the yes or no answers, right? You had to dive in and do some explaining. And it was awkward the first year or two, right? Like, it was
Sure.
awkward. Never done it before, and nobody knew what to expect. And it was just like, man, you would think now if we showed up to like any type of, we do it now, not just even at Thanksgiving. We do some at Christmas because we're not together all the time anymore. Everybody's
Right,
married and moved out. So
right.
whenever we're together, there's like this opportunity to be able to do. There's different things that we do, but that's just a couple, and just to make it, uh, the girls, if I don't lead that if I don't lead into that environment now when we're all together as a family,
Mm.
man, you would think that I just,
They
you
call
know,
you
blew it. Yeah, they're
yeah.
all about it, man, and you've
Isn't that
experienced that with
cool?
your grandkids, right?
No, I
Yeah.
have. I would make one suggestion though. I would get dessert and then do it. I'd be thinking about that pecan
No,
pie.
no, that's the key. Like, you can't get dessert. People get too
Oh,
lackadaisical, like, get sugar comas, and yeah, you gotta do it for dessert, but no, it
that's
was,
so cool.
yeah, it's been
Look what
fun,
you've done
man.
for your kids, though. You're gonna change the family tree in regards to how they share and what they do. We learn, we go over to Brooke and Holly's house now, and, the candles on the table, the dishwashing soap is in the same place as Rob, and the towels are folded the same.
Right.
People catch it rather than being taught it, right? They catch it at your house. They see, "Hey, we affirm, and they're gonna do that, Kevin. I mean,
Yeah,
your girls are gonna do that with their family, and that's gonna trickle down to generations. We forget, and we think it's just for the moment. No, this is for your grandkids and your great-grandkids on down the family tree. You started this tradition, and now they're calling you out on it, which I love that. That means it's important to them.
yeah. It's really good. So how do we want to encourage as we kind of finish up this episode? I know this episode should be coming out the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So if you got the notification and you're listening today, how can we encourage people? There's a couple days left before Thanksgiving. Obviously, even this first year, if you're listening and you've already done things and you've
Yeah.
got plans, by all means, do those things. Like live that out. Absolutely. Like go do those things. But maybe you're listening and you're like, man, I'm really not that intentional. I'm not that intentional at all. And I've got a couple of days. How can we encourage those people that are listening that are in that space right now that in a couple of days, right, you can do something. It doesn't have to be over the top. But what can they do that can be meaningful um, coming into this Thanksgiving weekend?
Yeah. I think if you have kids or don't have kids, I think we all can be intentional. I think sometimes when we don't have kids, we think that we don't need to be intentional, even with ourselves,
Mm,
right? We're living our best life now individually, right? Even if you don't have a spouse, even if you don't have children. And it's like, man, what can I do to move the needle in the life of somebody else? How can I be significant for somebody else's benefit? And you're right. Many people are listening to this now after Thanksgiving. There's going to be another Thanksgiving next year, but it's adopting this mindset
mm,
of how to live your life ongoing. It's not just for a day. We're doing this because we're very thankful on Thanksgiving, right? And we hear a lot about generosity. We hear a lot about thankfulness and gratitude. We hear a lot, so we really focus. But my prayer is that this changes your life going forward in being that word of encouragement, in looking outward instead of inward, being the giver, not the taker, thinking, how can I be clever and come up with something that maybe it doesn't cost anything. Maybe it's just that I go to the senior adult community, or maybe I go to the local church, or maybe I go to the place that's supporting homeless people, or, there's just so many things that we can do, and it changes the life of somebody. It doesn't have to be the masses, doesn't have to be the multitudes, but man, you will feel better about yourself at the end of the day. You're laying there thinking, hey, I left it all on the field today, right? I went out, I gave it all that I knew. I'm going to learn, I'm going to study, I'm going to change my mindset. I'm going to do it maybe differently next year, get more people involved. And I'll tell you, Kevin, it's contagious. When you
mm,
do this, it's contagious. The other thing is people want to be around you then because you're sharing about helping, empowering, encouraging, and edifying other people, and people want to be around that. If you're the wet dishcloth, everything's bad, nothing's good, like nobody wants to be around you.
mm.
But if you are bringing the light, you're helping, you're encouraging, you're changing, you're putting a smile on somebody's face, you're lifting them up, you're making their day better, it's going to return in spades to you. And I tell you, there's no one more impactful to their children than you as the parent. And if you want to see those kids do amazing things, sit down, take an hour, really plan through, think through how you can move the needle this year.
Mm. Man, I love that. You said something that made me think of this. We get busy in our lives. We do a lot of things in repetition. Maybe it's the grocery store, maybe it's the coffee shop, maybe it's the I don't know, the guest. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's the gym, right? Maybe it's for you, maybe it's church. Maybe you show up and you just do the thing and you just keep doing it over and over. And there is somebody that you can stop and you can talk to for 5 minutes that you've never talked to before and be an encouragement and a blessing to them.
Yeah.
They're like, it's so easy, right? It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't change our schedule. It's just being intentional. And it made me think there's so many versions of this story probably, right? Most everybody's probably heard this about, I don't know, here's my version, right? Uh, older gentleman walking on little kid walking on the seashore, right? And he's picking up these seashells or whatever, the starfish, whatever. There's hundreds of them, and he's picking up one, and he's throwing it in, and he's picking up another, throwing it in. And somebody walks by and says, "What are you doing, man? They're all gonna die." He says, "How are you making a difference?" And he goes, "Well, I'm making a difference to this one." And he throws one, back in the ocean. And I think that's so true, right? Whether it's our spouse that we need to pay a special attention to,
Yeah.
right? This season of life. Maybe it's one of our children. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's an aunt and uncle at Thanksgiving this weekend or the holidays or Christmas time coming up that you just need to sit down. Maybe it's a grandkid. You need to sit down and have a simple 5 to 10 minute conversation and be an encouragement and let them know that you care.
Yeah, I want you to go out there today. Ever who's listening to this podcast, go out there today, be intentional, make a difference, change somebody's life. Because at the same time, what you're doing is you're helping yourself create that view from the top. Go out there today and enjoy Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition, this Thanksgiving edition of generosity and gratitude and thankfulness. And I just want you to know the easiest way to connect with us is really going to be through our weekly email called The Climb. So you're going to love this thing. It's short. It's once a week. It's easy to digest of bite-sized topics that every small business owner and entrepreneur, husband and father can use to help them live a life of success and significance as they climb to their view from the top. So you can check it out at viewfromthetop.com/climb. That's CLIMB. Get the free access now. Get the next edition that's coming out next week. So as always, you can reach us at pod@viewfromthetop.com. And we thank you again for joining us. We'll see y'all next week.